Hey everybody, Spaz here, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of But Is It Power Pop? Got lots to talk about, so I'm just going to dive right into it. I'm going to start with something brand new. It's actually a reissue, but it just came out on 0 Hour Records. It is the Keys Grand Reopening. The Keys came out with an EP called Grand Opening many years ago, I guess 30 years ago. And this CD adds loads of bonus tracks. Thank you, 0 Hour. This is not the UK Keys. This is a band led by Bob Koenig from the East Coast of the US of A. And this is actually a fantastic collection. It is definitely power pop, but it's also got some psych in there, and it's got some jangle, and it's got some garage, and it influenced by all the greats, the Beatles and the Kinks and the Who, plus a lot of the garage bands. So it's definitely something to check out. The Keys Grand Reopening, that is brand new on 0 Hour Records. So look that up online, and maybe check out Bob Koenig on the interwebs. Also on 0 Hour Records, a couple old titles I wanted to tell you about. Loaded Dice put out this album, and it's crunchy, power poppy, punk, very straight ahead, got a nice feel to it, very Australian, and for those of you who enjoy Australian music, you know what I'm talking about. It's all different, if you're talking about Gangajang, or Loaded Dice, or Mental as Anything, or Split Ends, or Midnight Oil. If you're talking about any of those bands, they all sound different, but there's something inside there that you can feel that feels distinctly Australian. This is actually the album with bonus tracks, but that's not all that's available on 0 Hour by Loaded Dice. You can also get this collection of rarities, and that's a nice release there. So if you want to get some Loaded Dice reissue, 0 Hour is the place. Also, another band, Turnaround, on 0 Hour. This is an Australian band. This is a collection of tracks that they released as singles. I don't think they actually had an album out. And they had a song that was either on that Maiden Australia compilation that came out in about 82, 83, or it could have been on the Starstruck soundtrack. I don't remember. My mind's drawing a blank, but I do remember it was the song Turnaround, and that is the band Turnaround. Definitely check that out. I'm going to take you all the way to Los Angeles during the late 70s and early 80s with a band called Elton Duck. This band here recorded an album for Sony, or for one of the Sony labels. It could have been Arista, or it could have been, whoever Sony owns now, because it's a license from Sony. But for whatever reason, the album was never released, probably because some albums by their contemporaries were underperforming for the label. But Elton Duck featured right here, that is Michael Steele, who would go on to join the Bangles. And this is a collection that features, I think, pretty much everything they recorded. And that's quite a bit of material there. You can look them up on the interwebs, get a copy of that if it's still in print. It might be out of print. But yes, this is great pop. Is it power pop? No, I don't think so. I mean, it's not 2020 in the Plimsolls, but it's great melodic, and it totally fits in with all that stuff. Because remember, Jules and their Polar Bears, and the Motels, and Burning Sensations, and the Busboys, they were all treading the boards at the same time as 2020 Plimsolls, Knack, and all those other great bands. So this fits right in with that, and it's wonderful. Here's a band from the 90s, the LA scene in the 90s, Loud Sugar. I've talked about them before. I just want to remind you about them. This is a fantastic album. More than likely, you're going to find this in the used CD bins. I don't think it ever came out on vinyl, but it is just great. Imagine maybe like an independent Finn Brothers meets Squeeze with some funky things going on, and it's just one of those albums that I fell in love with this thing when it first came out. In fact, when they reissued it, I bought it on an independent label, and when they reissued it, because they knew I loved it so much, they actually thanked me in the liner notes. That might have been the first time I was thanked in liner notes. But who knows? Anyway, if you like, let's say the Toms, And if you like Shoes' first album, Black Vinyl Shoes, that home recorded stuff, you're definitely going to want to check out Richard X. Heyman, Living Room. He is still around, still making records. Unfortunately, this is the only Richard X. Heyman that I own. I'll eventually get around to getting those other ones. But this has a lot of great songs on it and deserves to be in your collection if you are a fan of that homemade power pop sound, because I certainly am. And going back to the late 70s and early 80s and all that fun stuff, let's talk about the Flashcubes. This East Coast band, just absolutely wonderful. They have a lot of classics that end up on many power pop lovers compilations and stuff. When they trade, and people always try to turn me on to the Flashcubes. But hey, I already know the Flashcubes. I don't know them, but I know their music. This is a great collection of early material that they put out. A lot of singles and stuff like that, but they have a lot of other stuff, such as this album, which is new material or studio and live material. Right there. They also have an album called Brilliant. I have a single here. I know I'm missing other stuff. I have 3 albums from Gary Frenay, one of the main songwriters in the band. And also I mistakenly said that Screen Test, which I talked about a few videos ago, I mistakenly said that they are feature 2 members of the Flashcubes. I was wrong. It features 3 members of the Flashcubes. So, mark me down as an idiot. Everybody knows that I love mod music, such as The Jam, Secret Affair, Squire, The Chords, but one of my favorites, and this album is probably in my top 20, 25 albums of all time. It's the Lambrettas, Beat Boys in the Jet Age. I have talked about this before, but I just wanted to remind you about it. It is just chock full of great songs. There's this version here is actually out of print. There's actually a 2 CD version out now that contains this exact CD plus their second album with bonus tracks. And if you get that, that's on the Salvo music label. If you get it on the back of the CD, it's got a quote from me. So that's like one of the high points of my life, being listed on the back of a Lambrettas CD, especially one that contains this full album. I love this album so much. It's melodic, straight ahead, just wonderful. And everybody knows, like I said, I love mod, and I like to collect a bunch of compilations of mod stuff from the 70s and the 80s. This one here holds a particular place in my heart. This is Mod Volume 2, because the first track on this is the Killer Meters Twisted Wheel, which is just an absolute stellar pop track. If that was a American band, people would call it one of the classic power pop songs of all time. It's great. The band is called the Killer Meters. I believe that they only have a few single tracks out, and it's available on This Is Mod Volume 2. You might want to do an internet search, YouTube. The Killer Meters space Twisted space Wheel space Go. But before you do that, why don't you listen to the rest of the stuff I've talked about. 3 o'clock. Is it power pop? No, it is not power pop. It is Paisley Underground. These guys are probably the originators of the Paisley Underground sound. At least they are one of the forefathers. And this is a stellar collection of tracks from the 3 o'clock that you will definitely want to check out. The great melodies. It's more Tomorrow Never Knows than it is 8 Days a Week. So it's got that sort of spacey psychedelic sound. But it's a bunch of great songs. Jet Fighter and you should actually, if you can, try to check out their albums as well. And also try to check out Michael Curcio's. He's got a couple bands, Permanent Green Light, a band that he's in with Matt Devine, and I forget the third chap's name, but there's just a compilation that came out on Omnivore. And then there's the Jupiter Effect. So those are 2 other Michael Curcio bands. He's the singer bass player with this band. If you want straight ahead, crunchy, modern power pop, look no further than the Glad Machine. Brad Thayer and the rest of the guys in the band have put out a wonderful album, chock full of great melodies, hooks, harmonies, very well produced. I can't believe that this isn't in every power pop lovers collection. It's a great album. They put a great Christmas song out in 2018. Is one of the best new Christmas songs I've heard in many years. And also they had on Bandcamp, you can go listen and maybe download a cover version of Rick Springfield's Jesse's Girl. And they keep it pretty darn close to the original arrangement, but they add stuff to it, and it is just stellar. I'm not a big fan of cover versions, but I'm a big fan of that. Have I ever told you about my friend Rick Ramadka? Well, I mean, I say he's my friend. I mean, I hung out with him once for dinner. But you know, on Facebook, you always think you're everybody's friend. Anyway, he's been in a lot of great bands. All of them are, if you have not heard any of this stuff, you're definitely going to want to check this out. This is, or if you only know one of the bands, you're definitely going to want to check out the other stuff. This is a band called Double Knot Spaz. It's one of his early recordings. Then he was in a band called Maple Mars. There's a couple Maple Mars there. Here's another Maple Mars here. Maple Mars, by the way, just started recording their brand new album. So hopefully maybe by the end of 2019 or before, we're going to be able to hear some new music. And he was also in a band called Ruby Free. All of these bands, he's a fantastic songwriter, great musician, and great guy. So you definitely need to check out either Ruby Free, Maple Mars, or Double Knot Spaz. And you know what? I say or. What I mean is and. So definitely check all those out. This next band, are they power pop? No, they're not power pop. Great pop, great songwriters, great arrangers. They put out 2 great albums on Virgin, and these albums have not come out officially on CD, which is a travesty. Maybe because they didn't sell on vinyl. But since a lot of you are now buying vinyl, you need to track these down. The band's name is Interview. This is the first album, Big Oceans. And this album has a slightly different cover, and it's just known as Interview in the U.S. These are CDRs that I purchased from one of the band members many years ago. They are not available anymore, but you can stream them on Bandcamp. But they are absolutely amazing. In fact, some of their demos were produced by Peter Gabriel. He was into them. That may not make you think, oh, power pop, but it's just melodic, great arrangements. And they're probably more along the lines of, they don't sound anything like, but they're going to be like Flash in the Pan or a band like that, where it's not easy to categorize them. They were part of the new wave, and they were being compared to and probably advertised with, because they're on the same label as like The Records and other great bands like that. But Interview is definitely a band that you need to check out. So if you're at a used record store, definitely check out Interview, Big Oceans, or like I said, this album here is called, it's just self-titled in the U.S. It's got the same picture on it, but the color scheme is different. So you definitely want to check that out. These are 2 of my favorite albums of that era. It's just, I can listen to these albums over and over again, and I have. Here's a person that used to be categorized as power pop, but in my opinion, and probably your opinion now, you're going to go, no, he's not power pop. The first 2 albums by Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Yes, this was being thrown at the same people who listen to Dwight Twilley and 2020 and bands like that, probably because, they're all, I don't know, people who play guitar and sing melodic songs. But yes, they were being fashioned as either a power pop or new wave band because the label didn't know what to do to them. But then they hit big with FM radio, and all the power pop comparisons just disappeared because everyone knows nobody wants to be saddled and stuck under the power pop genre. But this is definitely melodic. Could it be power pop? It could be power pop. It's not, though. But everybody knows those, and then probably even Damn the Torpedoes might even fit under that. But sort of lost that edgy feel after that. No fault to him, but because he sold a lot more records than anybody else who plays power pop, which I love, by the way. I'm not knocking power pop. I'm more or less, I just know that musicians are just nuts and they don't want to be called power pop. But I know that Ray Paul wants to be power pop. This is a collection of Ray Paul and RPM recordings. Sort of a best of Ray Paul right there, from Boston. Ray Paul, and also his latest album, Whimsicality, which actually made John Borak's Shake Some Action 2.0 top 200 albums list. So definitely check out Ray Paul. Like I said, this features some of that rare, hard to find RPM material. Definitely check that out. One of my favorite power pop albums of all time. Splitsville, Pet Soul. This is exactly what you think it is. It's just a marvelous collection of songs that recall the heyday of the Beatles and the Biatch Boys. This is just an absolutely stellar record. Everybody knows that two of the members, Brant and Matt Huseman, were from the Greenberry Woods, who I talked about in the last But Is It Power Pop? And I can't say enough about this record. This is one to cuddle. Seriously. You want to cuddle? Cuddle Pet Soul by Splitsville. White Lace and Promises, tribute to Paula Williams. That is correct. This just came out on the Curry Cuts label, and it's got a whole bunch of artists doing their versions of songs that Paula Williams co-wrote. You've got Carla Kane with almost a synth pop type. It's electronic. It's a lot more electronic than her work with Corner Laughers in her solo album. And then you've got, you got the Corner Laughers on there, and you got the Davenports, and you've got Andy Reid. You got a lot of great stuff on here. A lot of great songs here. Let me move my fingers there. This just came out. You can get that from Curry Cuts Records, White Lace and Promises. And I will be talking to Andrew Curry from Curry Cuts for my podcast, Beach Blanket Fort Bingo. And we'll talk all about this release and some of the other releases he's put out. I'm going to close this episode out with something that is not power pop, but it's more of my tribute to Mr. Daryl Dragon, known as the Captain, who passed away today, January 2nd. And this is from a box set. Yes, Spaz owns all 6 of the classic Captain and Tennille albums. Can you believe that? Yeah, you probably could. If you saw my stack of Andy Williams CDs and Paul Williams CDs, you'd be not surprised. Anyway, that's it. I hope you had a good time with this episode of But Is It Power Pop? And I hope you come back again. Thank you for hanging out, and we'll smell you later.